They say healing takes time. But what they don't say is how empty that time can feel. How the quiet can feel louder than the shouting ever did. How a home, even with all the furniture in place, can still feel like it's missing its soul. It's been a year, 365 days since the man I built a life with walked out the door and didn't look back. He didn't slam it. He didn't yell. He just left, like you'd leave a meeting you were bored of. And just like that, I stopped being a wife. I stopped being anyone's first thought in the morning. I stopped being touched, looked at. I stopped being seen. And let me tell you something. It's not the divorce papers that break you. It's not even the silence at night. It's the mornings. The mornings when the bed is cold and you've got no reason to cook breakfast, but you do anyway, just to feel normal. I tried. I went for walks. Read books I couldn't focus on. Lit candles that didn't mask the ache. Laughed with friends even though I felt like crying. Everyone thought I was moving on. But really? I was just drifting. And then came the visits. Unannounced at first. Just checking in, he said. My stepson. The boy I used to make lasagna for every Thursday. The one who never said much during dinner, but always insisted on doing the dishes. I didn't expect him to come around after the divorce. Why would he? I wasn't really his mom. Not by blood. Not by law. Just by circumstance. But he came. Once. Then again. And then every weekend like clockwork. At first, I thought he just felt sorry for me. Then I thought maybe he missed his old life. But what I didn't expect was to feel the warmth of being seen again. Noticed. Cared for. And what started as comfort became a question I wasn't ready to answer. Soft call to action, gentle, inviting. If you've ever stood on the edge of a moment, knowing it might change everything, but craving it anyway, then this story is for you. Subscribe to Heartfelt Tales Unfold, because sometimes the stories we never meant to live are the ones we can't stop remembering. Let me tell you a little more about who I am. Or maybe I should say who I was. I'm 45. And for most of my adult life, I was his wife. The kind of woman who planned birthday parties a month in advance, who ironed his shirts even when he didn't ask, who knew how he liked his coffee and made it that way even on days he didn't deserve it. I met my ex-husband in a coffee shop. Fitting, isn't it? I was in my late 20s, too idealistic for my own good, and he was everything I thought I wanted. Stable. Polished. He made me feel chosen in a way that made me ignore how seldom he made me feel heard. We had a solid life, at least on the outside. But over time, love turned into logistics. Affection became obligation. And somewhere between carpool schedules and business trips, I stopped being his partner and started being his background. He had a son, Jason. From his first marriage. Jason was 22 now. Quiet. Observant. He didn't talk much, especially not with me. When he did, his words felt like carefully placed stones, not flashy, not loud, but steady. Back when we were still a family, whatever that meant, Jason kept to himself. A polite nod, a soft thanks after dinner. I was the woman who made him sandwiches and reminded him to wear sunscreen. We were connected by circumstance, not by heart. So when the marriage ended, I assumed that connection would end too. But then, he started showing up. First, it was to drop something off, an old toolbox his father left behind. Then it was, do you need help with that leaky faucet? Next thing I knew, he was mowing the lawn on Saturdays, picking up groceries I didn't remember asking for, showing up with takeout because you probably don't feel like cooking today. I didn't question it at first. I was too numb to read into anything. Too buried in my own heartbreak to wonder why he of all people was suddenly there. The house we used to share, this big, two-story suburban shell, felt like it got bigger after the divorce. The kind of quiet that clung to the walls. I stopped turning on the TV. Stopped setting the table. Even the dog stopped waiting by the front door. But Jason, he brought a flicker of something back. Not joy. Not yet. but presence. A pulse. A reminder that maybe I hadn't disappeared completely. He started showing up every weekend, mowed the lawn, fixed the door, cooked dinner sometimes. At first, it felt kind. Then it felt like someone saw me. For the first time in a long time. I told myself it was harmless. That it was nice to have someone around. That it didn't mean anything. But some part of me, some part one had buried deep beneath all the pain, started to come awake. And that was the beginning of a storm I didn't see coming. It was a Saturday. One of those gray, heavy days where the sky can't decide if it wants to cry or hold it in. The kind of day that makes the whole world feel like it's holding its breath. Jason came over, as usual. I didn't ask him to, but he showed up anyway, like he always did. With his sleeves rolled, his hoodie damp from the drizzle, and that soft smile that made it hard to remember he wasn't just a boy anymore. I had cooked pasta and garlic bread, something warm, something comforting. We ate in the kitchen, just the two of us, rain tapping at the windows like a lullaby neither of us could fall asleep to. We talked. More than we usually did. He told me about work. About a friend who'd gotten fired. I told him I'd started reading again, something I hadn't done in months. It was easy. Too easy. The conversation felt like sliding into warm water. Gentle, familiar, dangerous. The lights flickered once, then twice. And then everything went dark. I laughed, more out of reflex than humor. He reached for the drawer by the sink and pulled out candles like it was second nature. We lit 3. The whole kitchen glowed with a soft, golden hush. It changed the room. Made it smaller somehow. Closer. I sat back down at the table, and he placed a candle in front of me. Our hands touched just for a second. But he didn't pull away. And I didn't either. It wasn't electric. It wasn't cinematic. It was just still. Too still. I looked up, and he was already looking at me. Not in that polite, distracted way he used to. Not like a son. But like a man seeing a woman for the first time. I cleared my throat and looked away. Pretended to check my phone, though the power was still out. He stood up and started clearing the dishes like nothing had happened. And maybe nothing had. But the air had changed. Thicker. Slower. He didn't leave right away. We sat in the living room for a bit, the only light coming from those flickering candles. He told me stories from when he was little. Memories I'd never heard before. I laughed. He smiled. And then he said goodnight. Simple. Soft. Like every other time. That night I didn't sleep. Not because something happened, but because something almost did. I laid in bed and replayed it. Not just the touch, but the look. The silence. The space between us that felt like it was shrinking. I told myself I was imagining it. That it was just the lighting. Just the rain. Just loneliness playing tricks on me. But I knew better. Because when someone sees you after you've spent years being invisible, you feel it. You feel it like a tremor under your skin. And you don't forget it. Not when you're that starved for it. The thing about silence is that after a while, you start filling in the blanks yourself. And my marriage? It had been silent for a long time, long before the papers were signed, long before the house got quiet. I remember the way my husband used to touch me. Not just in the beginning, when everything was new and soft and golden. But even later, those casual touches. The hand on the lower back when guests were over. The kiss on the cheek before work. They were small things, but they were something. Until they weren't. The last year we were together, he stopped touching me altogether. Stopped seeing me. I could have walked through the room in a red dress, crying, and he wouldn't have blinked. I became invisible. Like wallpaper in a house no one redecorates. Just part of the scenery. So when Jason looked at me that night, really looked at me, it woke something I thought had died. And that terrified me. Because I knew it wasn't right. I knew it shouldn't feel like anything. But it did. After that night, I couldn't unsee the way his eyes lingered a little longer. I couldn't unfeel the warmth in his hugs, those long, almost too long hugs. And it wasn't just him. It was me. I started noticing the way I fixed my hair before he came over. The way I paid attention to what shirt I wore, whether it fit just a little snug around the waist. The way my heart stuttered a little when I heard his car pull into the driveway. It wasn't about sex. It wasn't about desire. It was about being noticed. Being asked about my day. Being looked at like I mattered again. Jason started complimenting me more. My hair looked nice. Dinner tasted better than usual. The house felt warmer when I was in it. Innocent words. But they hit places I didn't realize were still bruised. Was he just being kind? Was he just trying to fill the void his father left? Or was there something unspoken between us? Something neither of us dared name. I started finding excuses to keep him around longer. Stay for tea. Can you help me with this shelf? Do you mind checking the attic lights? And every time he said yes. Every time he stayed. I felt like I was pulling something toward me that I didn't know how to stop. Studio microphone. I hated that part of me was curious. I hated more that I wasn't sure I wanted it to stop. Because maybe, just maybe, being seen again, even by the wrong eyes, felt better than fading into the background. And the worst part? I didn't know if I wanted to be saved from it. It was a Tuesday. The kind of day that slips by unnoticed, cloudy sky, coffee gone cold, a to-do list untouched. I'd been trying to fix the kitchen sink all morning. The faucet had been dripping for weeks, but I kept putting it off, like everything else that reminded me this house was too big for one person. Jason showed up just as I was about to give up. He didn't knock. He just let himself in, like he used to when his father still lived here. He saw the wrench in my hand, the frustration on my face, and without saying much, he rolled up his sleeves. The sink was stubborn fitting in a way. Water sprayed unexpectedly, catching his shirt, soaking it through the shoulders and down his chest. He laughed. I didn't. I couldn't. Because the fabric clung to him in ways I shouldn't have noticed. I told him there were towels in the hallway closet. He nodded and disappeared for a moment. I didn't mean to look. But I did. He was standing in the hallway, his back to me, shirt half off, the muscles in his shoulders catching the afternoon light. He wasn't a boy. Not anymore. And in that instant, I wasn't just his father's ex-wife. I was a woman watching a man too long, too closely. I turned away fast, ashamed of myself. Ashamed that it wasn't the first time, and afraid it wouldn't be the last. Later that week, he texted me. Said he wanted to take me out for dinner. Just to cheer you up, he wrote. No pressure. Just food and company. I told myself it was fine. That I needed the fresh air. That it was harmless. But before I left the house, I changed my outfit 3 times. We went to this small Italian place I'd never been to, dim lighting, quiet music, the kind of place people go when they want to feel something again. Our conversation started off light, but somewhere between the first glass of wine and the last bite of dessert, it changed. He asked me things no one had asked in a long time. What I missed. What I feared. What I hoped for if I still hoped at all. I don't remember everything I said, but I remember how he looked at me while I said it. Like I mattered. Like I wasn't just a woman who got left, but someone still worth holding on to. At the end of the night, he reached across the table and took my hand. Held it. Didn't squeeze it. Just stayed there. Like he was waiting for me to pull away. I didn't. And that terrified me more than anything else had. After that night, something shifted. I started waking up earlier. Putting on makeup again. Relearning how to smile without forcing it. Every time the doorbell rang, my heart beat just a little faster. But inside, I was unraveling. I was fighting a battle no one else could see. Studio microphone every time I caught myself waiting for his knock. I felt like I was betraying someone. Maybe not my ex, but myself. Because I knew better. I knew better. And yet, that didn't stop the way his presence softened the edges of my pain. Didn't stop the way I started imagining a life where I wasn't so alone. Until one night, the line between mother and woman, between caretaker and craving vanished. It was a Sunday evening. Cold. Not the kind of cold that comes from outside, but the kind that lives in your bones, the kind that settles deep when you've spent too many nights reaching for something that isn't there. I was curled up by the fireplace, blanket wrapped around my shoulders, a glass of untouched wine on the table. The flames flickered, casting shadows that moved across the walls like memories I didn't invite. Then the knock came. 3 soft taps. Not urgent. Not loud. Just there. It was Jason. I hadn't expected him, but I didn't send him away. He stood in the doorway with a bottle of red wine in one hand and something else in his eyes I couldn't quite name. "Thought you might want company," he said. And I nodded because I did, even though I knew I shouldn't. He sat beside me on the floor. We didn't talk at first. We just listened to the fire crackle, to the sound of the wind against the windows. The silence between us didn't feel awkward anymore. It felt familiar. He poured the wine, passed me a glass. Our fingers brushed. And then he said it quietly, like it had been sitting in his throat for years. "He never deserved you." I looked at him, confused, unsure. "My dad," he continued. "I watched the way he treated you, like you were a piece of furniture that just kept the place from echoing." My chest tightened, because it was true, and hearing it out loud made it feel heavier than ever. "I used to wonder," he said, staring into the glass, "how you stayed so kind, so soft, when he didn't give you anything back." I didn't know what to say, so I didn't say anything, and maybe that was the mistake. Because he turned toward me then, really turned, eyes locked on mine, and everything in the room went still. He leaned in, slowly, not forcefully, like someone giving me a moment to say no, to stop it before it started. And I did pull back, just a little. But then, I didn't. Our lips met in a soft, unsure kiss. There was no music, no movie scene magic, just breath and warmth and years of loneliness unraveling in one fragile moment. Then came the silence. The real silence. Not the kind that fills a room, but the kind that fills your chest. I pulled away, stood up, told him to go. My voice didn't even sound like mine, it was shaky, distant, hollow. He hesitated, eyes searching mine, but I didn't say another word. He left without arguing, closed the door behind him like he'd never opened it, and I sank to the floor. Felt the guilt wrap around me like smoke. Thick, unrelenting. Studio microphone, it wasn't passion. It wasn't revenge. It was need. Need to be seen. Need to be touched. Need to feel like I was still alive. Studio microphone, and I wish I could say it ended there. But it didn't. Don't miss the aftermath. It's the part no one ever talks about. Subscribe to Heartfelt Tales Unfold, because the echoes of choices like these, they don't fade quietly. The days that followed were hollow. Jason didn't come by the next weekend. Or the one after that. No texts. No check-ins. Not even a like on the photos I posted out of habit, trying to pretend life was normal. And me? I deleted his number. Not because I thought he'd call, but because I was afraid I'd text him. Afraid of what I'd say. Afraid that if I reached out, he might answer. The silence he left behind was worse than anything I'd ever felt. Worse than the silence after my husband left. Worse than the nights I cried myself to sleep, clutching the side of the bed that never got warm. Because this silence? It came wrapped in shame. It didn't echo with heartbreak. It echoed with guilt. I kept moving. Because what else could I do? I went to the store. Went back to work. Nodded at neighbors and smiled when I didn't feel like it. But something inside me was unraveling, quietly, softly, like a thread pulled from the hem of a dress I didn't even realize was falling apart. I avoided the living room. Didn't light the fireplace. Didn't touch the wine. I couldn't stand being reminded of that night, of what happened. Of what didn't stop. Of what I let happen. Studio microphone, he was wrong to come close, but I was the one who opened the door. And I didn't just open it. I stood in it, waited in it, wanted what was on the other side. I told myself it was a moment, a mistake, that we were both grieving, lonely people craving connection, grasping for something that felt like comfort in a world that had forgotten how to hold us. But that didn't make it easier. And then, one morning, I found something. It was tucked between the screen and the front door like he hadn't wanted to knock. Just a small, folded note. No envelope. No name. Just 5 words. You were never invisible to me. That was it. No apology. No explanation. Just that. And I broke. I didn't cry because I missed him. I didn't cry because I wanted him back. I cried because for the first time in years, I saw myself, really saw myself. Not as a wife, not as a caretaker, not even as a woman with regret, but as someone who had been starving to be seen, and didn't even realize how far she'd wandered to find it. I cried because I had become the version of myself I never thought I'd be. I cried because part of me didn't regret being seen, not by him, not in that moment. And that terrified me more than anything. I started seeing a therapist, not because of what happened with Jason. At least, that's what I told myself. I said it was to cope with the divorce, the transition, the silence. But somewhere deep down, I knew I needed to talk about him. About that night. About me. The sessions were quiet at first. Lots of pauses. Lots of staring at the ceiling, searching for words that didn't want to be spoken. But then, one day, I said it. I told her about the fireplace. About the wine. About the kiss. She didn't flinch. Didn't judge. Just sat there and waited. So I kept going. I talked about the loneliness. About the years I'd spent feeling unseen. About how I didn't want him exactly. I just wanted to matter to someone again. She said something that stuck with me. Sometimes, when a wound goes unattended for too long, even the wrong touch feels like healing. I didn't say anything back. But that night, I went home and pulled out an old notebook. One I hadn't touched in years. I opened to a blank page, and I wrote until my hand cramped. I wrote about how I used to dream of being held without needing to ask. About how it felt to hear my name said with intention. About how hard it is to forgive yourself for needing things people said you shouldn't want. Day by day, word by word, I began to understand. It wasn't about love. It wasn't about Jason. It was about being noticed. It was about a woman who had been living in a shadow and stepped into a flicker of light without realizing how dangerous it could be. And no, I never saw him again. After the note. After those 5 words. He disappeared from my life like smoke slipping through a crack in the door. No closure. No goodbye. But some nights, he shows up in my dreams. Not as a lover. Not even as a stepson. But as a presence. A reminder. I wonder if he regrets it too. If he thinks about that night, or if it was just a passing moment in a chapter he's already closed. I wonder if he hates me. If he ever hated himself. But mostly, I wonder what it says about me, that part of me is still asking those questions. Studio microphone, what do you call a moment you can't take back? A mistake? Or just a mirror you finally looked into? Because when I looked into his eyes that night, I didn't just see him. I saw me. And I'm still trying to decide if that was the beginning of healing, or the echo of everything I'd buried finally speaking back. Have you ever crossed a line you swore you never would? When you thought only other people crossed? When that felt, at the time, more like stepping out of a prison than into a trap? Have you ever done something, not because you wanted to cause pain, but because for just one moment, you were desperate to feel alive again? That was me. I didn't plan it. I didn't chase it. But I didn't stop it either. Studio microphone, have you ever crossed a line you never thought you would, and found yourself crying on the other side? Because I did. And the tears weren't just for the act. They were for everything that came before it. The silence, the loneliness, the days I walked through like a ghost in my own life. I asked myself a question most nights. Was I wrong? Or was I just human? Trying to feel real again? We paint betrayal in bold colors, red for passion, black for guilt. But sometimes it's softer. Sometimes it slips in through the cracks of a broken heart and feels more like mercy than destruction. So I'll ask you, tell me in the comments, was this betrayal? Or something more complicated? Have you ever loved someone the wrong way because it was the only way you knew how to feel anything? Have you ever needed to be seen so badly you accepted it from the wrong place, just to remember you were still here? If stories like this stir something inside you, if they make you pause, reflect, hold your own pain a little closer, then like this video and subscribe to Heartfelt Tales Unfold. Because here, we don't just tell stories. We unravel the human heart. Desire doesn't knock on your door wearing warning signs. It doesn't come with flashing lights or sirens. Sometimes, it comes dressed as help, kindness, familiarity. Sometimes, it sounds like comfort, like a voice you've heard before, only now it's softer, more tender, more intentional. And sometimes, it holds a mirror so close you forget where your reflection ends and the hunger begins. You don't always know when you've gone too far. Sometimes it happens slowly in glances, in silences, in the way someone lingers a little too long in your doorway. I don't expect forgiveness, maybe not even understanding. But if this story lingers with you, if something in your chest tightened when you heard my words, maybe it's because you felt it too. The ache, the stillness, the longing to just be seen. Be careful who you open your door to when you're lonely. Because sometimes, what steps in is a version of you you're not ready to meet.